The Sixers got some good and bad news pertaining to the 2025 NBA Draft Lottery. The Brooklyn Nets, they're on a win streak, which is obviously good news for the Sixers in their standings, but the Pelicans, who are right above the Sixers in the lottery odds, officially in full-blown tank mode with about 7 games left to go. You take a look at the updated NBA lottery odds as of today, Tuesday, April 1st. You can see the Sixers now a 1.5 game lead over the Nets for that number 5 pick. Of course, things can change with the lottery, but they'd much rather be at number 5 than number 6, and only 2 games now behind the New Orleans Pelicans. So thank you, Brooklyn, for winning a couple games here. The Sixers now full control of staying at that number 5 spot in the lottery odds. And if you look at what their current odds would be at that number 5 spot, assuming they stay there, they do not drop, they do not rise, the odds of getting a number 1 pick with the 5th best odds, 10.5%. And the teams above them only at about 13%. So it's not that big of a difference between number 5 and number 1 at getting that first overall pick. They have a 43% chance at getting a top 4 pick. And of course, the all-important top 6 pick for the Sixers, ensuring they keep their first round pick and they don't have to give it away to the Oklahoma City Thunder. 63.9% chance and a 36% chance that they fall out of that top 6 and have to forfeit that draft pick to Oklahoma City. So staying at number 5, very important, but maybe even a chance to move up a little bit. We'll get into that here on today's show. But before we do, the Sixers are going to need a lot of luck when it comes to that lottery. Shoot, if they could jump up to number 1, get Cooper Flagg, that could be franchise changing. But at the very least, they have to stay in the top 6. If you want the Sixers to win the lottery, get that number 1 overall pick, and potentially be able to draft Cooper Flagg, hit that thumbs up icon, like the video. Don't jinx it. Don't be the one who doesn't like the video and the Sixers fall out of the top 6, because that's going to be on your head when the NBA Draft Lottery does come around. So, of course, got to look at the schedules here as we talk about lottery odds and where the Sixers could finish. About 6 games left for every team here in the remainder of the season. Sixers play tonight against the Knicks, then Thursday against the Milwaukee Bucks. They have a matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves over the weekend, the Miami Heat, Washington Wizards, Atlanta Hawks, and then the Chicago Bulls to close out their season. So that is 7 games remaining for the Sixers as they continue to try to get the best lottery odds they possibly can. And looking at this schedule, a lot of good teams on that schedule. You know, you look at a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, even without Dame, they're obviously a better team than Philly. Minnesota's a good team. Miami, even though they've been bad since the Jimmy Butler trade, they're still better than Philadelphia. The only win I could see the Sixers possibly getting over these last 7 is against the Washington Wizards. Of course, Washington did beat Philly last week, but Washington, one of the worst teams in the league, right there with Philadelphia. So I could see the Sixers maybe winning that game. That is on the road, though, in Washington. Atlanta, Chicago, both better teams than Philly, fighting in that play-in tournament. So really, you know, worst case scenario, those last 7, 1-6, but for the lottery odds, I could see them realistically going 0-7. And then, of course, we got to look at what the Nets still have remaining, because although we are a 1.5 games ahead of them in the lottery odds, still, with 6 games left, plenty of chances for things to happen. Sixers win a couple games, Nets lose a couple. It's not set in stone as of right now. Nets have Minnesota as well, Toronto, the Pelicans. That game's going to be very important, and I'll talk about that coming up here in a little bit. Then the Atlanta Hawks, the Timberwolves again, this time on the road, and they end their season at home against the New York Knicks. The Nets, the last 2 games, they've picked up 2 huge wins against the Wizards and against the Mavericks. Of course, also 2 not very good teams. Washington down there at the bottom of the lottery odds. Dallas, ever since they made the Luka trade, they have been injured, haven't won a lot of games. Well, Anthony Davis has been back, so still a good win there for Brooklyn. And before those 2 games, it was neck and neck, and it's been that way for a while. The Sixers and Nets pretty much tied at 5-6 for the majority of the last month or so. But with the Nets going on this little win streak here over the past couple of games, that has helped propel the Sixers now to that number 5 spot. So they really do control their own destiny right now when it comes to keeping that number 5 pick. So the Nets, we know they're obviously a really bad team and a tanking team at this point, but with them being able to lose those games, Sixers, of course, looking much better right now. Now, the Nets do have some winnable games on their schedule. Both the Raptors and the Pelicans are games I could see the Nets winning. So I don't really think there's any chance that they lose out given this schedule. So, again, good news for the Sixers because their schedule is pretty difficult in terms of facing good teams. The Nets, hopefully they can pick up another win here or two to make even more distance between these two teams. And again, why this is so great for Philadelphia, they now control their own destiny when it comes to getting those top 5 odds. Of course, they don't control what pick they end up getting in the lottery, but you'd much rather have the 5th best odds than the 6th best odds. As I talked about earlier, the current odds to keep their pick, if they stay at number 5, about 64%. If they drop down to 6, that goes down to 45.8%. That is an 18% difference, and that 18% difference could be the difference between keeping the pick entirely or not even getting a first-round pick in this year's NBA draft. So it is so critical that they stay above of the Nets in terms of these lottery odds. But there's also a chance, just like there's a chance they could drop down to number 6, there's a chance they could jump up to number 4 over the New Orleans Pelicans. Just a couple games behind the Pelicans when it comes to those odds. And with 6-7 games left, obviously anything can happen. Of course, now we got to take a look at the Pelicans schedule to get a sense of how they could possibly end their season. And you see here, unfortunately for us, because we want the Pelicans to win games, a lot of good teams on their schedule. The Clippers, the Lakers, the Bucks, all probably losses for New Orleans. The Nets game, got to be very critical. We don't know exactly what these teams' records will be at that point, but probably want the Pelicans to win that game, even though you are jockeying with the Nets as well. Bucks, again, probably another loss for the Pelicans. Miami, we'll see, but I don't see the Pelicans winning that game. And then, of course, OKC, but who knows? Maybe by that point, OKC is resting all their guys, and the Pelicans could get a huge win to end the year. Now, obviously, off the top of the show, I said the Sixers got good and bad news. The good was the Nets winning a couple games. The bad news, Pelicans are officially in full-blown tank mode. They've been very injured all year long, pretty similar to the Sixers, but yesterday, Shams Charania tweeting out the Pelicans have officially shut down Zion Williamson and CJ McCollum for the rest of the season due to injuries. Of course, 2 of their better players right there and their best player in Zion Williamson. So now you look at the current injured Pelicans. This is basically their entire starting 5. And look, I'm not trying to say the Pelicans shouldn't be doing this or this is a bad look because the Sixers are doing the exact same thing, right? Whether these guys are really injured or not, they're holding them out. I understand it. It's what all teams do. So I'm not trying to say the Pelicans are doing a bad thing here, but no Zion, no CJ, no Trey Murphy, no Herb Jones. He's been out for the year for a while. DeJounte Murray's also been out for the year for a while. So very depleted roster over there in New Orleans. They do have some guys playing well, similar to the Sixers, but really no star power for them to go out there and try to get some upset wins. Of course, that game against the Nets, as I briefly mentioned, could be massive. The hope is that Brooklyn wins a couple games, so you distance yourselves a little bit more in those lottery odds, but then New Orleans is able to win that game against Brooklyn, even though we don't want Brooklyn losing games. If it kind of works out perfectly, Brooklyn wins a couple, New Orleans wins this game against the Nets, and then you have an even greater chance at jumping them in those odds, being 2 games back as of this point. I don't see the Sixers rising any farther than that. Again, with 7 games left, you're 4 games behind the Hornets. LaMelo Ball is out for the season now for Charlotte. You're not catching Utah. You're not catching Washington. And you are definitely not catching Charlotte. So if they do stay at that number 5 pick, of course, lottery, they could jump, they could fall, all these different things. Who could they potentially be looking at number 5? I did a mock draft last week on who they could draft at number 6 when they had the 6th best odds. But now, being at number 5 does change some things a little bit depending on who could be there and what direction the Sixers ultimately decide to go in this offseason. So we'll take a look at some of the top guys available 1 through 4, if one of them were to fall, but also guys that I do see being available at number 5 for Philadelphia, again, assuming they stay there. Before we take a look at those prospects, Phillies gear is available right now through our friends at Fanatics, chatsports.com/Phillies25. The Phillies 3-1 on the season, starting off their series against the Rockies with a big win. They'll play again tomorrow. The Braves, by the way, off to an awful start in that division. So good for the Phillies to get a little early season movement, early season momentum here. Any type of gear you would want, you can get through our friends at Fanatics. You can get shirts, hats, hoodies, jerseys. Maybe grab yourself a Bryce Harper jersey, Alec Boehm jersey, whoever you'd like. You can go ahead and get that through our friends at Fanatics. Again, that is chatsports.com/Phillies25. That link will be available in the comment section as well as the description of today's show. So you can go support the Philadelphia Phillies as they get their season underway. All right, so these are the consensus top 4 picks in this upcoming NBA draft. Pretty much no question that these guys will go off the board at 1 through 4. Of course, Cooper Flagg will be the number 1 overall pick. Whatever team is so lucky to get that pick will have a franchise-changing level player with Cooper Flagg, who has been absolutely balling out in the NCAA tournament for Duke. I think Duke is not a lock, but probably my pick right now to win the entire thing. Dylan Harper out of Rutgers, although Rutgers not quite as good as you'd think for having 2 top 4 picks. He has been a very highly touted prospect. VJ Edgecombe played well for Baylor in their couple of games in the tournament, but a super athletic high flyer there. And then Ace Bailey, a little bit more of a unknown in terms of him as a prospect, does have a very high ceiling at that wing spot, standing at 6'10" with some skills, but has a long ways to go in terms of his development. There's no question to me that if one of these guys fall to number 5, you take them, you run up to the podium with that card and you make that selection, especially if it's not going to be Cooper Flagg. But if it's VJ Edgecombe or Ace Bailey and they do fall to 5, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm taking them. Dylan Harper's an interesting conversation, particularly with the Sixers. One, I don't think there's any way he's not drafted in the top 4. He is that good of a prospect. But also, we've talked about the Sixers possibly drafting a guard, and I don't really love the idea of them going guard once again. When you have Maxey, you have McCain, you hopefully have Quentin Grimes back. But at the same time, if by some miracle Dylan Harper does drop to 5, he is just that good of a prospect and that good of a potential player that I think you'd have to take him anyways and just find a way to make it work, because his ceiling and his ability is, in my opinion, just a step ahead of the rest of these guys in the NBA draft. But any of these 4, I would be totally comfortable taking at number 5. So the question becomes then, who are the next guys you could draft, assuming those top 4 did go off the board? These are my next 5 right now. Kamon Malawach, center out of Duke. Derek Queen, center out of Maryland. I've seen the comments. A lot of you have been asking for one of these 2 centers to be the pick for the 76ers. And while I don't think the direction they go in is at that center spot with that pick, I think they'd probably rather go someone that can make a greater impact on the wing right away. It's certainly a possibility, and I will have a video coming out sometime this week diving more into each of these center prospects if that is the route the Sixers want to go. Kasparis Yakachonis, the guard out of Illinois, had a very good tournament as well. A little bit of a taller guard, so he could play alongside Maxey, alongside McCain, but not sure that would be the pick. We've talked about Trey Johnson a bunch. He can score the ball like nobody else, but has to develop some of the other aspects of his game. And then one of my favorite players in this year's draft, Konkonopel, has been also balling for Duke in this tournament as well. You can see they got 3 guys here in this top 10 that have been playing very, very well as freshmen for Duke. He is maybe the best pure shooter in this year's draft. I took him at number 6 in my last mock draft. But if you are at number 5, there's some other prospects available. He's definitely still in play for the pick, although it does become a more interesting conversation. And when you look at what the Sixers could do at number 5, being at number 5 in this year's NBA draft is kind of where things start to become a little more cloudy, because those top 4, as I've mentioned, are kind of far and away the 4 best prospects in this year's draft. The draft really starts at number 5, depending on where you go. So if you're at that 5 spot, you really have a decision to make. And for the Sixers, it's not just what prospect do you take, but they got to decide what direction they go in as an organization now moving forward for the draft, for free agency, for their coaching staff. They have to decide as an organization, are we still going to try to get whatever we can out of this Joel Embiid, Paul George era and maybe pick somebody that can help us more right now? That's why I went Concanopal, because I think out of all those 5 guys I just showed you, he probably does have the best immediate impact right away, although maybe the lowest ceiling of the 5. Or do you decide, you know what, this Joel Embiid era, this Paul George era, we don't envision us getting it done with their age, their contracts, their injury histories. We just need to go in a different direction. And do they decide to blow it up and go young, lean into some of the youth and the talented young players on this roster, of course, like a Maxey, a McCain, a Justin Edwards, bringing back a Quentin Grimes? If you do go that direction, then I think going with a center like Kamal Malawach or Derek Queen could be more in play at number 5. So it's really going to depend on what does Daryl Morey want to do, what does this organization want to do as they move forward into the future, kind of at a crossroads right now. So you got to really make a decision, because this draft pick, you might not be picking in the top 5, top 6 again for a little bit. Hopefully they're not, right? That's the idea. So you do not want to mess up this potential draft pick, and you do not want to waste it, because Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse could very well be on the hot seat as we approach this offseason. I don't think either of them should be or will be fired. We talked about potentially firing Nick Nurse in yesterday's video. I am not a fan of it, but you have to get this right whatever way you decide to go, because the future of the franchise really does depend on it. But I'll ask you guys, what say you? Who would you pick at number 5, assuming that Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe are all off the board, and you have your pick of the rest of the prospects? Who would you select number 5 overall? Go ahead, let me know down in the comment section. Make your voices be heard. We'd like to have you guys be a part of the show here, of course. Before we hop on out of here, another reminder, be sure to give us a follow on our social media pages here on the channel. You can follow my personal Twitter account at Jake Chipper. Love to tweet about the Sixers, of course, every single day. When we have videos going out, I let you know. Would love to chop it up with some of you guys over there on X. Also have an Instagram account at 76ersNowIG, posting usually multiple times every single day. Some short form content goes up on there. Just more conversation around the Sixers over there on our social media pages. So if you want more coverage on Philadelphia as we enter the offseason, go ahead, give us a follow.